Why logistics reliability is now a board-level concern. For a long time, logistics reliability lived below the executive line of sight. Delays happened, costs ticked up, teams worked around it. Most disruptions were treated as temporary and operational, something to absorb, not escalate. That no longer reflects reality. Recently, logistics reliability is showing up where it didn't before. In board discussions, earnings risk assessments, and questions about whether commitments can actually be met. Missed deliveries are no longer isolated execution issues. They are increasingly tied to penalties, revenue timing, and customer retention. And once they fit at that level, there is rarely a fast fix. The issue isn't that logistics problems are new, it's that reliability has become harder to assume. When disruptions stopped being containable, most supply networks were designed for efficiency, not margin for error. Over time, buffers were trimmed, redundancy was treated as excess, and coordination across modes became tighter. The system worked, as long as conditions were stable. Today, it rarely is. Small disruptions now travel faster and last longer. Weather events, labor gaps, equipment shortages, infrastructure maintenance, each one alone is manageable. Together, they compound. When one link falters, alternatives are limited. Rerouting often just moves the problem downstream. What makes this different is where the impact lands. Logistics failures are increasingly visible in missed delivery commitments that trigger penalties, revenue pushed into later quarters, margin erosion from last-minute workarounds, customer relationships strained by inconsistent performance. By the time those signals appear in financial reporting, the underlying issue is no longer temporary. Ports, where reliability breaks down quietly. Ports offer a clear example of how logistics risk has changed. At major gateways like the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, vessel congestion has eased compared to the pandemic years. Terminals are moving cargo. On paper, capacity looks available. The breakdown happens after containers leave the dock. Various factors disrupt onward movement. Cargo clears the port on schedule, then stalls. When that happens, shippers are forced into late decisions, rerouting freight, paying premiums, or accepting delivery failures. From a board perspective, the problem isn't port throughput, it's predictability. Once inland coordination fails, delivery risk becomes systemic. Inventory piles up in the wrong places, revenue tied to fulfillment slips, accountability becomes blurred across functions. That's why ports have become less about congestion headlines and more about enterprise exposure. Why oversight hasn't kept up. Most companies still manage logistics through fragmented ownership. Procurement negotiates freight terms, operations manages execution. Finance tracks the variance afterward. Risk teams focus on suppliers, cyber threats, or compliance. No single group owns whether goods can actually move as planned when conditions tighten. That structure held when logistics was forgiving. It doesn't hold when reliability is scarce. When accountability is split, early warning signals are easy to miss. Problems surface only after commitments are broken, and by then, options are narrow. The risk of assuming availability. For years, planning models treated logistics as a constant. Risk scenarios focused on price swings or supplier failure, not on the inability to move goods despite having supply in hand. That assumption is now one of the weakest points in many strategies. When logistics reliability breaks down, companies are forced into reactive trade-offs, absorbing margin losses to preserve customer relationships, renegotiating delivery terms mid-contract, carrying inventory in locations that don't support demand, delaying revenue recognition tied to fulfillment. These decisions are happening more often and with less time to evaluate them. Why boards are paying attention. Boards are not diving into logistics because they want operational detail. They're paying attention because logistics failures now affect outcomes they care about: earnings visibility, customer trust, and execution risk. For now, logistics reliability touches forecast credibility, contract performance, working capital efficiency, regulatory and compliance obligations tied to delivery. Repeated failures raise a broader question: is the operating model resilient or just optimized for conditions that no longer exist? What executive teams need to revisit. Addressing logistics reliability doesn't mean micromanaging routes or warehouses. It means deciding how reliability is governed. Questions executive teams are now being forced to answer include: who owns logistics reliability when trade-offs appear? How early do reliability risks surface before commitments are made? Which assumptions about movement and capacity are embedded in strategy? Whether logistics resilience is treated as a capability or just a cost. Those answers increasingly shape network design, inventory strategy, customer segmentation, and capital allocation. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.